Hey YouTubers and my 61 subscribers to YouTube. I'm having a cup of tea this afternoon and I thought I'd do a little video, something that's I think is really important that as guitarists and stuff that we learn about. And when we first start playing, we all learn like random chords. We might learn a G major, we might learn a D major or an E minor or a C. And I don't know if it's the same for you, but for me, I didn't have a teacher. I had friends of my mum and dad's, and I had mates as well as I got older that played, that I picked stuff up from. But it was all sort of random, disjointed stuff. It never came together as a whole thing to really understand how a song is constructed and how I could go about learning the song in a more effective way, in a way that I could understand it and make sense of why this chord was used here and where the melody comes from and how the melody and the chords work together. So one of the things that I really am passionate about now, with more so my older students that I teach, for kids and stuff, I generally stick to just learning songs and filling in the gaps when I see necessary and dropping in little bits of information when I think it's appropriate. But one of the things that you should really try to get an idea of as soon as possible is that a song, doesn't matter which song or what it is, it's constructed from what we call a musical key. Now, what is a musical key? Well, the musical key is a group of notes that are organised to start and end with the same musical letter, and they then are used to create the melody, and then the chords that go with the melody come straight from the chords. In other words, the chords are made from the notes of the melody. And if you can get your head around that and then start to understand and see that in the music that you play, then it becomes a little bit more easier to understand how a song is constructed. And when you come to do your own compositions or work out solo unaccompanied guitar pieces, then it's easier to understand how to go about supporting a melody with a chord. And that's been a game changer for me. When I first got my head round learning a scale and then learning that the chords that you play come from a scale, it made such a difference to my whole understanding and my approach to my guitar and music in general. So what I recommend that you guys do, I've got my guitar in the corner here, is I'm just going to do a quick demonstration of the musical notes across the guitar neck. Now, I've been watching a few YouTube videos myself about from famous and world-renowned guitarists. One recently, in the last week or two, that I've looked at is a guy called Pat Martino, famous jazz guitarist who had a brain tumour in the 1980s, and he'd already made an established name for himself and became a great guitarist in the 70s. But when he had his brain tumour, he had a part of his brain removed and lost all his memory. And when he was recovering and he got back into thinking about his guitar playing and who he was, because he had no memory of who he was and who his parents were or anything, he basically learned completely from scratch. Obviously, he got a foundation to go from, because he got all these albums and things from there on, and he'd also, his muscle memory and stuff was still there. So, but in terms of his approach to learning the guitar, it was quite interesting, and how he's got this system which is more in line or more true to the way the guitar is as an instrument, as opposed to, you can see the piano over here. Music theory for all instruments tends to come from the piano, and from the guitar's point of view, the guitar is nowhere near anything like a piano. So trying to get an idea of how the guitar works is something that's really tricky and takes a long time to get your head round. Now, Pat Martino's method, you know, it's very simple in its initial idea, but you still end up having to study a body of work, you know, and you still have to apply it, so there's still a lot of effort involved. And he doesn't say don't study traditional sort of compositions, and not compositions, theories, and the way guitar teachers tend to teach the guitar. It's valid, and it's, you know, something that you'd need to do, but it doesn't really get to the heart of what the guitar is as an instrument. It's the guitar's out there on its own, man. And I found it an incredibly difficult instrument to learn to play. So, but just going back to some sort of traditional ways of thinking about the guitar, the way it's taught, generally speaking, I tend to do it like this. I'll just grab my guitar. And what I want you to, if what I was saying about learning about musical keys and the alphabet, is that the guitar, really, if you break it down into blocks, though these blocks go with 7 notes of the natural scale. The natural scale being the notes A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. And the way I've learnt it, going off the 6th string here, which is tuned to the letter E, to the pitch E, my first block would sort of extend to the 1st, 2nd and 3rd frets. And so I would learn a block of the neck starting off the letter E and just play across in a vertical way, vertical fashion, and that would give me all of these letters. So that was E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Okay, and then I'd move to from the note E, I'd move to the 1st fret, which is my next natural note, which is F, and then I learn the next block, which spans from the 1st fret to the 5th fret. I actually went up to the 8th fret there, but here's a block. And then there's another block, E, F, G, starts off the note G, and then I'd learn another block, which again spans from the 3rd to the 7th frets. And I'd do that all the way up the neck, 7 blocks. The first block, though, just to illustrate what I'm talking about, all these natural notes, they are organised into a family of notes that we would call the natural scale. And that natural scale starts with the letter C. So if we count alphabetically from the note E here, E, F, G, A, B, C, I end up at the 5th string, 3rd fret. And then I can play from there, starting from this letter C, and I'm going to pause when I end on the next letter C. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. And that gives me this scale of C major. Now for each one of those notes of that scale, C, I can create a chord. How do I do that? Well, a chord means to play more than one note at the same time. And this is where the old piano has a very easy way of doing this. You just basically play the letter C, then you miss a note, play a note, miss a note, play a note. You can go hold down 3 notes and go all the way up the keyboard in what Pat Martino would say is an automatic sort of way. So you don't need to do anything different. You just continue up the keyboard. I think that's the right way I've described that there, what he's talking about. And it's a very easy way of finding chords and finding the scale. Whereas on the guitar, it's got nothing to do with that at all. Even the ideas of tones and semitones, and it relates to the guitar, how this major scale is made up of a sequence of tones and semitones, but it is quite a complex and tricky thing to get your head around on this instrument when you're coming at it from the point of view of thinking about music theory from a piano. Anyway, if we took that same, just going back to this sort of traditional way of looking at things from the piano's point of view, because we still have to sort of get your head around some of that. If we were to think about the letter C, which is what I've got here, and then I play C, I miss the D and I play an E. So that's the first note and the third note. So on my scale, C, D, E, Now if I play the C, the first note and the third note, I starting to get a nice little bit of harmony there. Now from the letter E, if I climb up another 3 notes, E, miss out F, and then play G, so E and G, E, F, G, and if I play those 3 notes, that's where I'm starting to get my chord. And then the note C reappears at the top. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. And that would give me a chord of C major. Now if I can do that for the first note of this scale of C, well I can do the same thing for the second note. And then for each one of the notes of the scale, we can create this sequence of chords. And the fancy technical name for that are diatonic chords. So this C major scale is called the diatonic scale, and the chords that we get from this scale are called diatonic chords. The word chord means that you're playing more than one note at the same time. When I'm teaching kids, I always say to them, imagine like a piece of rope or a string or something like that. It's made up of intertwined, more than one strand all working together to hold to make a strong chord. And it's the same on the guitar. These 3 notes go together to make a strong sound, something that's quite harmonious. So that chord of C major is the first chord on the first note of the scale of C major. Now that whole scale now becomes the key of C. So if I can make a chord for the first note C, I can make a chord for the second note, which is a D. It happens to be a minor chord. And then the third note, E, happens to be another minor chord. F happens to be a major chord. G, which is happens to be another major chord and one of the most important notes in the scale because it's note number 5. The 6th chord, which is A minor, and the 7th chord, which is a funky one, which not many guitarists when they start out play, and it's called a B minor 7 flat 5. It's got a very funky sound to it. And then we end up back to C again. So 7 chords that move away from C and end up coming back to C. And the word to describe that in music is called a cadence. And that word, I was interested, cadence, what's that all about? Well, a cadence, if you think about that word, it comes from the word cascade, which means to fall. And that's what all these notes are doing. They're falling away from the letter C and moving back towards the letter C from moving to resolve back to the first note, the home note. And that's what's happening in music when we're creating songs. We move away from the first chord and we have a selection of other chords that then end up coming back to the same chord at the beginning. So the first chord resolves to itself. So this basic idea of having a sequence of notes that form a scale, and then each one of these notes forms what we call a musical key, which is where we get the notes for the melody, and we also get the notes for the chords from. We construct the chords for songs from the scale. So when you've learnt a song, these chords aren't random like you may have learnt when you're a beginner. They're all taken from a scale and they're all organised into a framework, a family of chords and notes that all relate to one another, and that's why they all work really well. So I haven't done a video for a while, and it's just down to time and stuff, and I haven't done one where I've put up a backdrop and fancy lighting. I just thought I'd have a cup of tea this afternoon, and I was sitting here thinking about doing a video, and I just thought, you know, I do this a lot with my students, this idea of a scale and chords and a musical key, because most of the students who come to me have all learned how I learned. We learned random stuff that didn't really mean anything, but as soon as you can bring all that together to this idea of a musical key and that the chords are from a scale, and it helps in your understanding. So what I am going to do in the next few weeks or so is to put on a sequence of lessons that are going to explore this, and I'll make available online free worksheets which will help you learn the entire fretboard, and for each position within the neck, you'll learn to play all the different chords you can play. And there's only 7, but they all have slightly different shapes. So it's not this, it's sort of not a monumental mountain of stuff you've got to learn. It's just some very basic key concepts. Once you learn it within one position on the neck, you can apply it to all the rest. Just takes a little bit of time to sit down and internalize it then, and really get good at memorizing it, and then you can use it to compose or arrange your own material. So, hope you enjoyed that. I'm going to finish my cup of tea, and I will see you guys on my next video, all about scales and chords. See you later.